Hello everyone, welcome to the virtual block practices SmackDown. Before we get started, I need to apologize for my voice. I'm a little bit stopped up, so I'm sorry you're going to have to listen to me. Our EQ for this session is what are the best conditions for learning. Notice that that's not what are the best conditions for learning in a block schedule, it's just for learning period, because there really are no block practices. There's just best practices. The best practices that we're going to look at today fall into one or more of 5 categories: movement, discussion, retention and review, formative assessment, and brain breaks. The key for these 5, though, is that they are all particularly beneficial during a block period or a class that's 80 to 90 minutes long. But first, let's do a bell ringer before we get started with our SmackDown. And really, you can't do this bell ringer with us, so I just wanted to explain what we did because it's actually a valuable strategy for a block period as well. It's called a value lineup. And when we did our SmackDown face-to-face, I asked this question: how comfortable are you teaching in the upcoming block pilot? I had all the participants in the room line up on a continuum from extremely comfortable to extremely uncomfortable. And once you have your students create this value lineup, you find the midpoint and you fold the line in half. So the person who's the most comfortable is now facing the person who's the least comfortable, and the continuum works down from there to where the people in the middle who are neutral are facing each other. And then you pose a secondary question, or you ask them just to discuss where they are. Here was my secondary question. What's another word that describes your feeling about your ability to teach in the pilot, and why? So what's a word other than uncomfortable or comfortable? And then just have that conversation very quickly. And the big goal of a value lineup is to get people who may be on opposing ends of a spectrum to see the other side's perspective. It's great for persuasive writing, by the way, or debate prep too. So, last thing that we're going to do, last bit of housekeeping, what is a SmackDown? A SmackDown is really fast professional learning. I'm going to present 10 tools, and each tool I'm only going to talk about for 1 or 2 minutes, or maybe even less. SmackDowns just scratch the surface of professional learning. It just gives you an introduction, and then it gives you the opportunity to dig in and get more information on your own. And if you want more information about any of the strategies that are offered in this SmackDown, you can check the resources in this Schoology folder, or you can talk to an IC. Any one of us would be happy to help you. Let's really get started. Here is our first strategy. It's called a learning map. I know that you're all aware of thinking maps, and learning maps is just a bigger, broader term. Thinking maps are a specific type of learning map. So learning maps are a great strategy for retention and review because they help students see their learning. And over the course of this SmackDown, I'm actually going to ask you to make a learning map. So in a second, I'm going to tell you to pause what you're doing and go back into the resources folder and find the learning map. And in fact, go ahead and do that now. Did you find it? The map that I'm asking you to fill out today says block practices, and that's the key concept that goes to the top, are really just, and then a paraphrase of what they are, that's what goes in that second bubble, best practices intentionally chosen for an 80 to 90 minute period. And then it lists the 5 different types of strategies that we're going to discuss today. So what I want you to think about right now is, if this is what a learning map is, where else might learning mapping fit beyond retention and review? So go ahead and write learning map under retention and review, and then figure out if it fits anywhere else. Okay, strategy number 2 is talk with your feet. This is a really simple movement strategy that encourages critical thinking. It's used to analyze students' beliefs very much like value lineup, they're asked to evaluate a statement or answer an opinion question. And then instead of explaining what they're thinking, they talk with their feet by walking to a location in the room that represents their answer. So this can be used for yes/no questions, or it can almost be like four corners where there's multiple answers set up that they can walk to. It's great because it forces everyone to come to an answer, and then you can decide, all I want to do is have them talk with their feet, or once they've spoken with their feet and selected an answer, then I can ask individuals within that group or within each group to defend why they answered what they answered. So talk with your feet is a movement strategy. Where else might talk with your feet fit on the learning map? Our third strategy is Archimedes Lab. This is advertised as an anti-stress tool, and I can tell you that I use it as an anti-stress tool. It's great for brain breaks. And one caveat though, it uses Flash Player, so kids won't be able to use it on their iPads. They will be able to access it on their computers, but that's okay because you might want to put it or just project it onto your smart board. Let me show you what it looks like. It says, I couldn't think of anything. Sorry. Show me your imagination instead. And then this colored line appears wherever you move your mouse. And when you click, it does different things. Really simple, silly tool. I used to love using it with my smart board, and I would call the kid up to the front of the room who just was fidgety and couldn't help himself, or kids that really needed that movement piece. And it's great with a smart board because you can just smack the smart board and see these different things appear. And you can kind of tell the harder that you hit, the bigger the click is. You can actually have multiple students up at the smart board at one time doing this. So just silly fun, and it's actually research-based. The colors and the continuous movement of the line are proven to kind of free your mind and clear your mind of what you've been seeing and help you refocus. I used to use it all the time when I was grading. So this is a brain break tool. Where else might Archimedes Lab fit? Affinity mapping is our fourth strategy, and this is actually a strategy that CISD suggests in their learning framework. We're going to talk about it a little bit differently than how CISD discusses it, though. So the basic concept for affinity mapping is you pass out sticky notes, and those could be physical sticky notes, or you could have kids do it on a virtual sticky note board like Linowit, and you give them some sort of question to consider that's going to have multiple answers, and they write down each answer on a separate sticky note. They do this individually. And then they get together in groups, and here's where this strategy differentiates a little bit from how Coppell advertises it. In groups, they organize ideas based on similarities, discussing and defending the categorization as they go. Coppell says to do that categorization silently and then to discuss and defend after. You can do that, but I think it works really well both ways. The key here is just it's a strategy and a purpose for discussing instead of just saying turn to your partner and discuss or turn to your table and discuss. It gives them something specific to do. So where else might affinity mapping fit on your learning map? Our fifth strategy is carousel brainstorming. This is a great strategy that you're going to think, oh wow, why didn't I think of this? Because it's very similar to gallery walks, and I know that we've all done gallery walks before where you create a product and put them up on the wall and walk from place to place and provide feedback or just observe what people have created. Carousel brainstorming is like that, but it's a blank paper that goes up first, or it's a piece of paper with just a question or just a statement on it or a need on it. So you see right here a question might be posed like, what is analysis? And then the goal of carousel brainstorming is for students to move from paper to paper and add their ideas. So they are brainstorming as a group. It's almost like physical crowdsourcing. So great movement strategy, but where else might carousel brainstorming, or really gallery walks, fit on this learning map? Thinking prompts is our 6th strategy. Thinking prompts are obviously great for retention and review. They could be used as a bell ringer. They could be used as a transition between different activities that you're doing. They're devices that provoke conversation, dialogue, and deep thought. They could be video clips, newspaper articles, cartoons, photographs, a problem, be it a math problem or a real world problem, a work of art, an artifact. And they're effective because of what they actually accomplish, and that's promoting dialogue, helping students make connections, providing background knowledge, and engagement. So it's really just about using time really well. And I know that many, if not all of you, are already doing thinking prompts. You just might not have thought of them as something to use as a transition tool as well as a bell ringer. They can be used in lots of different places. Jim Knight actually suggests to have some thinking prompts kind of in your back pocket for in those moments where students get a little bit unruly and you need to bring them in. You just bring that thinking prompt up and get the kids going and back on task again. Our 7th, I forgot. Where else might thinking prompts fit? Our 7th strategy is sit down if. It's also can be called take a stand. I just call it sit down if because that's what it was called when I was in high school. It's a great brain break strategy. It's a 2 to 5 minute game where you ask everyone in the room to stand, and then you tell them to sit down when the statement that you make characterizes them, and once seated, they remain seated. So the goal is to be the last man standing. So you might say things like, sit down if you are 15 years old. Sit down if you have on white socks. Sit down if you work out every day. Sit down if you have a job. Sit down if you've never lied to your mother. Sit down if you've gotten a traffic ticket. All sorts of different things, completely random, that you can come up with on the fly. And it's just a quick, fun game to break up what you're doing. Where else might sit down if fit? Our 8th strategy is taxonomy of reflection, and I guess really and truly reflection is the 8th strategy, but I wanted to give you a tool for reflecting because I think most teachers think that reflection is a really good idea, but it's so abstract that they don't know how to do it in a meaningful way. And I love taxonomy of reflection because it makes it meaningful. Sorry about this down here. I don't know what's going on. Didn't look like that when I presented it earlier. So obviously taxonomy of reflection is a retention and review strategy. And this guy, Peter Pappas, provides a list of reflection questions for each of the 6 levels of Bloom's taxonomy. This is not the whole list. That's just an example that he has. What I love about this list of questions that he has is that it allows you as the teacher to target and guide reflection. So if you've just introduced a new concept, you might want to ask a remember question or an understand question. But if you're more toward the end of a unit, you're probably going to want to ask an analyze question, an evaluate, or a create question. Or you can also say, here's the list of questions, provide it to the kids and say, which question do you want to answer? And then the question that they answer is going to provide you with a level of understanding of where they are and what their level of thinking is. So where else might taxonomy of reflection fit? Our 9th strategy is quiz, quiz, trade. This is a movement strategy. In this movement strategy, each student receives a card with a question written on the front and the answer to that card or answer to that question on the back. And every student in the classroom needs to have a different question and obviously a different answer. So they look for a partner, and once they have a partner, student number one asks the question on his or her card, student number two answers, student number one gives feedback. And then they repeat that process with student number two's answers, so that's our quiz, and then they trade cards. And they find a new partner and repeat those steps over and over and over again until the teacher calls time. So, great movement strategy because the kids are up and moving around and finding different partners. They're not moving constantly, but they have the ability to move wherever they want to in the room. And it's also really neat because it exposes kids to lots of information in multiple levels. They're asking questions, they're answering questions, they're providing feedback on how people answered questions. So it really helps embed that information in their brains. So where else do you think quiz trade might fit on your learning map? Our final strategy is conversations. There's not any information on here for you about conversations because I had a hard time turning it into something that was really concise. So let me just explain it to you. Conversations are where you take, it's a small group discussion strategy, and you divide your class into groups of 4 to 6. And you provide all of them with a discussion question to talk about. It can be the exact same discussion question, or it can be a question that's different but connected, or questions that are entirely different, whatever you want to do. You have them get started with the conversation, and then after a sufficient amount of time has passed for them to get into the conversation, you as the teacher interrupt the conversation and say, hey, I really love the conversation that you're having, but let's mix it up. And you ask 1 to 2 people from each group to get up and move to the table or the group to the right. And so if the kids are situated in a circle, they all get up and move around to one table, or 2 of them get up and move around to one table, and then they start the conversation again. So it's the same discussion question at that table as before, but now they've got a new dynamic of kids. And then after another sufficient amount of time has elapsed, you say, all right, we're going to move again. 1 to 2 people now move to the left. And so you, again, have a completely different dynamic. If you have an even number of groups, you can even say, okay, now move across the room and come up with all sorts of different ways for people to move. But it eventually helps students see that the more ideas that they have present, or the more thinkers they have present, the more ideas they have present, and the deeper understanding they have of a concept. I have videos of it. It's really interesting to watch in action. All right, I said that was the last one. You technically have a bonus. Where does value lineup fit in this concept map? We talked about that as a bell ringer. Where does it go? And actually, I didn't even ask you, where does conversations go? So make sure you include that one as well. Once you finish your concept or learning map, go ahead and move on to the next set of instructions in the virtual instructions. Just so you know, you're going to have some time to design and incorporate 1 or 2 of these strategies into your learning design for the block pilot, particularly in the block periods. And then I'm going to ask you to do some reflection and provide us some information about what you did and why you chose to do that, and then let you give some feedback to someone else. And once you have submitted all of those things, you will have the ability to earn credit. I will provide credit in Eduphoria for people who submitted or who completed this virtual flex starting on January 4th. This course will close on January 2nd, right before we come back from break. Thanks so much for listening, guys.